Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants to the 2016 Advancing Development Goals International Competition, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all at this award ceremony, which is the third since the inception of this competition in 2014. We have to thank somebody for the idea, for the implementation, and for being, since the start, the engine and the spirit of this brilliant idea. Thinking of Ambassador Jene Stelling, and please join me in thanking him for this great idea. We will hear from him a bit later, but as this 2016 competition is on urbanization and the challenges of urbanization, there could be no more qualified speaker to introduce the topic tonight than Mrs. Kassira, who is the Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat, but more importantly was the Mayor of Kigali in Rwanda for 6 years, and who had to confront directly the challenges of a city in this fast urbanizing world, and who manage a city in such a way that she received a prestigious international award. So it is a great pleasure for us and a privilege to listen to what you have learned from your experience and from your present role in the UN system. So please take the floor.
Thank you. I guess you can hear me. Yeah, thank you very much, Director Philippe Marine. Honorable Excellencies here present, let me specifically recognize Ambassador General Sterling. If I don't pronounce the names well, kindly bear with me. The founder and president of this very innovative and auspicious event. I want to recognize the board members of the school. I want to recognize colleagues from the UN. I was with Eve and the others. I want to recognize the students, and thank you all for honoring UN Habitat and giving me a chance to address you today. Good evening. Habari from Nairobi. I was just reflecting, when was I last at school? Time flies. It's almost over 20 years ago. So it's such a joy for me to come back to an environment that refreshes our minds, especially when we as leaders are trying to deeply think on how best to serve the world. And so I want to thank the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, and specifically also thank you, Director, for considering this theme of challenges of urbanization to be a worthwhile theme to focus on as part of our role in leading the world to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I know that oftentimes in our work we talk about innovation, creativity, and doing things differently. But over time, we get used to rhetoric. We need to come back to the center of thinking. And that is why it's such an honor for me. Soon after Quito, less than a month, I'm here to engage with you in this institute with an inspiring body of scholars and the young audience to exchange views on the most important trends in our times, specifically urbanization and its role in supporting us as human beings and as leaders to foster sustainable development. The Graduate Institute is once again showing thought leadership in the vanguard of the key issues currently discussed at the UN and in the international community, and we hope that will go down to the local level where implementation takes place. And you're right. If you could allow me to call you Philip, you call me Isa. The litmus test is going to be at city, local government level. And it's important that we connect this discussion to that level. So I want to congratulate you. I've been encouraged to see you address, and when I was reflecting on what you've been discussing, it's quite critical and important that you decided not only to criticize, but to inspire. People learn and change from inspiration, but we forget sometimes. So when we recognize excellence, when we ask students to compete, but at the end of the day, we recognize those that have performed well, it has a very big effect. And from my personal experience, I remember, especially I think that time when I was mayor, when I was recognized, it made a difference. And I hope students, the big difference is how do you share success? How do you give others the platform to feel they had a role? And how do you pursue that to be impactful on ground? I want us, and allow me kindly to share with you a few statistics. I'm sure most of you know quite a lot of it. But just to put this into perspective, why urbanization now? In the early 20th century, only 20% of our population lived in cities. That was around 900 million inhabitants. Today, the majority of the world population, as we know, of the 7 million, about half of that are in cities. But importantly, by 2050, 70% will be living in cities. Just to clarify that when we talk about cities, we mean a continuum from capital cities, mega cities, to intermediate towns, centers, to the smallest. And it's important that we look at it from that perspective, because it's then that we see the connection between the role of national government in creating national urban policies that create healthy urban-rural linkages with the implementation of policy at local government level. So it's against this background that with this rapid urbanization, we're not surprised that we have had a number of challenges, especially given the fact that where it is fastest, there is limited capacity. And maybe as the world intellectual capital has moved, it has moved in various sectors, especially from the developed to the developing, but not so much in the science, knowledge, and skills of urbanization. So it's important that that's recognized. So as we move ahead, we ask ourselves, what can we do to create the momentum to have the right level of knowledge and skill base, research, dialogue, discussion that can benefit the mayors across the globe? Because when that doesn't happen, then we can talk, but we'll not be able to implement that. And so, there are a number of challenges that we are seeing. I want to highlight a few of them. Of course, the first one that we're all talking about here is the issue of the environmental challenges. Our cities consume 78% of the world's energy and produce 70% of the greenhouse emissions. Many coastal areas globally are now victims of major disasters caused by the negative effects of climate change. I'm sure Geneva being a center of our humanitarian interagency collaboration, every 6 months we often meet here. And I can tell you, even us as UN Habitat, who were born as a normative development agency, we are spending over 65% of our resources in humanitarian work, partly because of the effects of climate change that sometimes spill into actually even man-made disaster. So we have reason as leaders to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do differently if we want to see results? The second point is the social challenges. True, there has been overall development globally, but we can't run away from the fact that we have got a high level of inequality today than we did have even 15 years ago. And that, statistically, we talk about almost 1 billion people in slums and slum-like conditions. That sounds a statistic, but behind the statistic are human beings. And if children, women, men fighting to survive in slums are increasing in number, how do we expect them to be productive in the world of tomorrow? Why should we be surprised when they get bitter and start burning the beautiful cities that we're building? I guess this could be one of the reasons that today many conflicts are not cross-border. It's not countries fighting against one another, it's intra. And that's something that we need to keep at the back of our mind. Because from our research, we've realized that there's a lot much more stress and conflict, much more not as a result of poverty alone, but poor people living next to affluence. It becomes a lot much more painful. And I think we should be held to account as human beings. I again believe that Geneva, as a seat of human rights in giving dignity to the human being, I think is an appropriate center for us to reflect on that. The third point is, as we talk about cities, oftentimes from a social perspective, we look at, of course, the poverty I talked about, but the fundamental question also is on the issue of urban planning and design. And we are seeing that in the last 20 years, cities have dramatically lost their sense of planning and the key basic fundamental requirements to appropriate urban planning and design to ensure the right levels of agglomeration, to ensure the right amount of public space, to ensure the right socioeconomic mix, because these are factors that are inherently important for us to talk about sustainable development. Densities have declined to the extent that about 52% in developed countries is actually sprawling, and in about 38% in developing countries. How do we then talk about economic development if in the same city you have got urban sprawl on one hand and abject poverty on another? And every year we are spending billions, trillions of money spreading infrastructure irresponsibly, if I can put it bluntly. The other issue, of course, that goes with a cost on land and on our food security. So because of that, we need to look at how to address these fundamental processes, challenges, and I think there is no better place to do so than from the scholarly and intellectual capital investment perspective. I want to recognize and I want to thank you, as in your different capacities, for the role that you have individually and collectively had in the forging of the Sustainable Development Goals. I think there is hope in that. We see passion, we see commitment. And amongst these 17 goals, we appreciate that they're universal, they're integrated, they're looking at issues, but also they're looking at the root causes. There was a lot of discussion as to whether we should have the issue of urbanization and human settlements as a cross-cutting issue, or we should have it as a focus. But we thank you that we have both, because it is worth giving it attention, given the importance it has in determining the success of the Sustainable Development Agenda. That was one of the major steps. The second step is when you agreed that, yes, climate change has to be addressed in Paris. And before then, you also agreed that we need to work together to address the issue of disaster and risk in Sendai. And a few weeks ago, you were with us. I think it was timely that the endorsement of the new urban agenda comes in later, because the foundation is much more clear when it does at that time. Why do I say so? Philip, when you're addressing me, you said, yes, share with us your international civil service perspective. I think if there is one thing that we would like to bring to the world as international civil servants, is the issue of coordination as we deliver. And that is what we are focused on because the world that we are serving is so integrated. Yes, and I'm an ASG in charge of UN Habitat, but before I come to UN Habitat, I have to understand and support the overall UN-wide system support to member states. So that is very important that that be the anchor of what we are discussing here. And I'm happy to note that we are focused as the United Nations to serve member states, to serve our partners at global, at international, at national and local level from an integrated perspective. And if there is one area that really needs that, it's in cities. I tell my colleagues that you can't imagine, I led the city maybe 6 years ago, from 2006 to 2011. The first problem was, there is limited budget, but I can tell you that least scarce resource is time. I just didn't have time for so many people lining up, talking about different aspects. It makes it a lot easier when we are coordinated. So we appreciate and we endorse that. And I think that is an assurance that we want to give you that as an outcome of the new urban agenda, we have come out clear to say that we want to work as a team and we would like to engage academia, private sector, grassroots organization, women and men, all on the same table. And irrespective of your level of power, you have a say. We need to listen to one another as we move ahead. So, what is in the package of the new urban agenda? I think 3 or 4 things come to our mind. First is to realize that urbanization is an engine and source of socioeconomic transformation. And it's not a problem. It's a problem when not well managed. It's a problem when not well led. I've been in a number of discussions and people are saying, no, we don't agree with you. I hear them because today it's a problem because we haven't led it appropriately. But I think if there is one thing that we can reflect on as especially leaders of tomorrow, and I'm appealing to our young students here, that if there is one thing that you have in your hands that you can use to change the world, it is urbanization. It's within the reach of everybody. From developing to developed, it's within the reach of everybody. You cannot say that you don't have it. But you need to give it the thinking that it calls for, and you need to give it the humility to integrate and engage with everybody who is really good and give them the space that they deserve. I think that's a key thing, and that's a shift from the MDGs, because the Millennium Development Goals, we are looking at it as a problem because we are seeing poor sanitation, slums, those were the targets, looking at the problems. But we didn't ask ourselves, how do we use urbanization to turn it into a source of socioeconomic transformation? So on that note, I think there is no better way of just highlighting a few things that we have seen. The first one, for it to be that, there has to be coherence at national government level. The national urbanization policies have got to hinge around different areas of specialization. And maybe this is where things fall apart. Because people come in as experts in different ministries, looking at different aspects. Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Lands, but we need a coordinated policy process that looks at legislation and governance, especially on land, urban planning and design, urban economy all together in an integrated manner upon which you build the infrastructure and the housing and the rest of it. But we also have observed that there is a big gap between the national policy level and local government implementation capacity. And that will not be captured by just doing policies and designating funding. Local governments have to be part of the debate. After all, they are closest to people. And many times, even in crisis, even in poverty, people have good ideas on how they can get out of that. So engagement and support of capacity, but importantly, the space to discuss that is very important. The third, I think, very important point, which again is a lesson for me that I have had to remind myself of, is the essence of leadership is based around the connection between the leader and those that you're leading. It's an issue of trust. How do you keep that in a fast-moving world? How do you ensure that you understand the feelings and the problems of the migrant and marginalized, as well as the big wigs in the city. That is why we need to connect with the different levels of leadership and engage and stay connected with the people. So because of that, it's clear in the new urban agenda that it's action-oriented, but we need to monitor. There's a monitoring mechanism, there's a review, and every 4 years, we will be reporting on progress. We look forward to working very closely with you in supporting this overall process. I would have loved, as you can see, to keep on talking, but I know that I also want to listen. And I believe you have been part of this process. I know that you're committed to this agenda. It is not going to be easy, because whatever we are going to be claiming for belongs to someone. If you want public space, it's already owned by someone. So there has to be the political will to implement the new urban agenda. But the fact that we have a commonness of purpose, the fact that we have got these clear goals, strategies, I think makes it implementable. We just have to keep pursuing this. Finally, as we age, as we get older, there is a game we used to play. I'm sure you also play it here, relay. You run and then you give the stick to, but you have to ensure that the next person you give the stick to is like the most, the best at running. You don't get ice and make hard, because you have to make sure that you win. That's why we want to give our leadership stick to the young ones. So, because we are running against a process that's already in place. We are saying proactively plan, but the pace is already much higher than the capacity of us to do so. We're very hopeful that we can make it. Where there is passion and where there is commitment and collaboration, there is a way. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for this fascinating and inspiring keynote speech. And as you agreed to take a few questions, maybe let me invite the floor. Who would like to start here?
Hi, my name is Leticia Pancrazi. I'm from the LSC and I'm part of the Microfarm Network team. And the question I have for you, just graduating from the LSC, is there often seems to be a gap between academia and practical application. And so I was wondering what was your thought on that gap, and also how, I guess, our generation can do to reduce that gap and feel less like what we do in academia seems to get lost in practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I can take 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll respond. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Yves D'accord from the International Committee of the Red Cross. First of all, thank you very much for the speech. I just wanted to have a bit of a sense, because you have this double perspective. You are right now at UN Habitat and you've been a mayor. And my sense is over the last 10 years, the mayors are, and in general, the local authorities are somewhat changing more and more their view about the world and their contribution to the world. I see them being extremely pragmatic, proposing solutions. I see that when it comes to violence, when it comes to migration, for example. I see them also somewhat willing, not anymore just to network between cities, but maybe also somewhat contributing, or maybe, I don't know, replacing some of the very loose governance that we have right now. We do have a lot of problems between states to just be able to even find collective solutions. So I just would like to have a bit your view. The next 5 to 10 years, what do you think? Do you think we will see some connections between cities willing and mayors willing to not just network, but starting to maybe willing to have playing a different role than what we've seen so far?
Okay, thank you very much. I think they're very important and very key questions. On the first question of how academia can become more pragmatic, I think you're right, but we need to be intentional and create systems to enable that to happen. And as I reflect on what I've seen in my, like, maybe last 10 or 12 years, there are ways that that can be done, but we haven't yet connected very well. When you, for instance, study here, and part of your studying involves research and visits, engaging you practically in areas that you're specialized in, it becomes a lot much more easy for you to do research, but also to have a feel on what is happening on ground. We have programs within UN Habitat, but also with the cities. There are quite a good number of cities that have got connections with their universities and schools, where part of vocational training, part of research is actually supposed to, does facilitate the kind of addressing the challenges that is happening. But that has been individual initiatives or sub-regional or subgroup, but it hasn't been like a very intentional, strategic way of facilitating that. I believe we can now take advantage of that and do it. And I saw a difference between, well, I wasn't there 20 years ago when we did Habitat 2, but at least for those who were there, they were saying there was a difference in the level of participation of the non-government bodies, and there was space for them to really discuss and engage. Now, what we need to do is to bring this down to the regional and local level. But we need to be very intentional about it. So I think that is one area. The other one is connecting it with achievement and recognition. For instance, what this institute has done. I think it's something that should be exemplified, and we can work together to spread that. Because as long as, if I'm a student, I want to work hard, but it should also be valued. It should be recognized. So in addition to connecting universities with UN agencies, with their cities, it would also be good that we create a framework where those who are doing excellently are being recognized so that it becomes an innovative way of bringing everybody on board. I must say that I've been deeply inspired by, even within the UN as a system, the work of the interns and volunteers. They do amazing work. But we know that currently there are challenges on, especially if you're somewhere where it's not home and there are no rules to support you, give you at least the minimum that you need for you to be able to sustain that. So those rules to facilitate young people to deliver, to serve, but at the same time not suffer too much, have to be looked into. But it's a very good idea. What my colleague Yev has asked me, I think it's very true. It's true, I think, because of three reasons. One, the mayors being close to being in the line of fire. You have to deliver. When you don't, the results face you. But I think also, over time, mayors have connected a bit more. I'm saying so because 10 years ago, I joined the body of mayors, the local government authorities, and that took me to the African level, that's the CLGA. But we were really networking. It was not tangible. We were struggling, and at a point I realized, no, I don't think I want to spend my time running all over the world when I have got issues to do at home. But that has grown. It has grown to the extent that now they have a body that is quite strategic, thinking through, and now that actually has brought mayors to the center of debate, whether at national level, but also at UN level. For the first time, last year I was telling them, even in the 2030 agenda, I remember when I went with my president to the UN when I was mayor, I was kept out. I was shocked. All of a sudden I was told, no, you are not government, you are civil society, because I had gone through with the UCLG. I had been there 2 years before as a member of parliament, and I thought I was much more representative as a mayor than member of parliament. But according to the rules, parliament was representing government. Mayor, you are local authority. We ended up in a church discussing matters of importance. But now that has changed. They have a body, and they meet with the government, and they meet with the UN. But importantly, beyond that, we need to support, again, as I responded to your question, we need to create systems to support mayors. I believe that the value add of decentralization should be much more around service delivery and improving the livelihoods of people than power fighting. So when how do you help a mayor who is coming with a political ticket to focus on results? That is why when we break down the SDGs and goal number 11, and we say, how are we monitoring the implementation of goal number 11? We are saying, what is national government doing and what is the city doing? So we assess city prosperity, and we support the mayor to see technically, politically, what needs to be in place for him to follow through. We need to create an incentive package, for instance, because the mayor, even if they want to change things, they may fear because it's politically costly. But if you have a way that you can define that that's like a model everybody has agreed upon, it makes it easier. Then the second part is you may have a lot of political will, but you know what, if you don't have funding, it's stories. We need to link good governance, good planning, good, transparent systems with ability to access some level of funding. And I think we're developing programs that will support mayors to do that. It's work in progress, but I think it's coming along.
Thank you, Ms. Casiria, for your speech. I'm a student from the Philippines. I'm David, and my question is for students who are interested in from your advice. You said that work is cut out for us, for the next generation to enter sustainable urban development work, and we know that it's a very complex job. You work at both normative and operational levels. You preach and also act at the same time. It's a very tough job, and there are a lot of us who want to dedicate our lives to, all our lives to that agenda. Say we are accepting the baton in a very complex urban age. What should be our non-negotiables as we tread through the decades? This is a very general question, but I'm really interested in taking the baton together with my friends.
Thank you. Renate Pelke, I was one of the jury members for the challenge this year, and in relation to this question, you were mentioning how the implementation at the local level has become key for implementing the SDGs. Now, for many graduates, it's very prestigious to enter the UN system or to have an international career. Do we have to become better at attracting talents to the local level, and how could we do that?
Okay, these are very good questions. Let me start off with what's non-negotiable. I think the first step is the space and the place for you to give your views to leadership. It doesn't cost money, but it's your right. And I think we already have, the rules and regulations, but what happens in real life is, I think recently one of the youth put it very well, that we don't want to participate only. We want to also contribute to the final decisions that are made. It's important to have the platform, but it's also important for your voice to be valued. And I think that is very key. But together with that, I do recall that what the youth did, especially at the time when I was serving, is that they claimed their space, but they claimed their space to give their views and also to contribute to problem solving. And that undoes many things. For every challenge we had, they were almost the first to give, to showcase their role. One simple example, and I think I was lucky, and that responds a bit to the answer that the question that Eve asked me. The struggle we have as human beings is the management of power. And how do you, within that power framework, how do you refrain from fear of whoever is claiming that space and see it as an opportunity? I remember in the first year when I became mayor, there was a system, a performance management compact system that was established, through which the mayor would discuss and engage with key leadership bodies and finally form a plan of what was going to be done in the year and a budget, and engage with government. And that became a compact. And I signed it with the president in parliament with the other mayors. Now, that helped me to focus on results than my power fighting, because I had to be accountable. Every 4 months, I had to show results. So what I did, I took the same performance management, called in everybody. Youth groups, women groups, private sector. Believe you me, youth were the first. They said, you know what, we want to sign a performance management compact with you. And we are going to do what we can. And these are youth from the informal settlement. Some of them actually not even with money. They said, we want to keep our city clean, green, and safe. How do we do it? So we started planning, and through that, because it was voluntary, we in 3 years reduced the budget on cleaning by 70%. But in return, what did I give? 1, recognition. 2, I now started finding out why is it that you are in that informal sector business, and what can we do to get you to the bank, to get the money that you need, to get you, organize yourselves, benefit from the condominium law, put up big buildings. So all of a sudden, they were fellow leaders. But they also had a say to come back and say, Mayor, we are not happy with this. So that power space, you claim it by putting your foot down that you want to say something, but more importantly, by holding yourself to account. You will win trust, that for sure. On the question of implementing at local level, from my personal experience, to be honest with you, I feel a better person and a better servant because I started from there up. I'm not so sure, much as I would have loved to, I don't think I would have understood the problems in the real world if I had started up. I feel it gives me a sense of direction and a sense of clarity on results because I worked at that level. You don't have to be a mayor from the beginning. To be honest with you, I even didn't like politics. I'm a technocrat. Do you know I'm a veterinarian? I loved animals. And because I did my work in vets, then I realized we are working so hard, but we have a problem in the markets. So I started fighting to get our livestock products on the market. And you know what? The farmers asked me, you know what, you need to represent us in parliament. But I told him, you know what, I don't like politics, I don't even know how to campaign. He said, you don't need to campaign, we will just vote for you. But that was facilitated by our law again in Rwanda. The constitution gave the 30% of women to be elected by fellow women. This is how I went into politics. And the journey began from there. Now, 3 years down the road, I said, the biggest challenge we have is the markets in Kigali. I'm going for Kigali. And that is how. But I'm not saying that my story has been perfect. To be honest with you, I have fallen down a number of times, made mistakes, learned from them, and moved on. So it's not like you must get from there. But it's useful for you to come from different angles. And by the time you come to policy, global discussions, you have a good feel. I think I can just leave it there.
Thank you so much. Really, it was a great pleasure to listen to you, and I think our world needs many more leaders like you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So let's go now to the stuff for which we have all come tonight. And let me invite the first team to go onto the stage and present their project. So please introduce yourself and make your presentation.
Good evening. We are the City Progress team. We would like to thank the Graduate Institute Geneva and the Kofi Annan Foundation for giving us the opportunity to understand and explore the relevant topic of disaster preparedness in urban planning processes. We would also like to thank Ms. Aisa Kasira for her thought-provoking speech on the impact of changing patterns of urbanization. Like you, we believe in the power of urban planning in shaping cities, and therefore include planners as a critical aspect in our proposal. I would like to begin by introducing my team. My name is Shruti Arvind, and I study community and economic development at the University of Pennsylvania. Noni Mathur is pursuing her master's in economic development at New York University. H.S. Kritya is pursuing her MBA in international business from the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Delhi. Rachna Edakandi studies marketing at Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. Prerak Shah is a chartered accountant and is majoring in finance at the Xavier Institute of Management as well. City Progress is an active data sharing, dissemination, and analysis portal that can be implemented in cities across the world. We envision it as a social enterprise with strong aspects of community involvement in preventive data disaster planning and an integrated crowdsourced information platform. Today, the world spends 4 times the amount of money on disaster mitigation than preparedness, and as Ms. Kasira mentioned, coastal areas where most cities are located are disaster prone. We believe that urban planning, as a profession with a stake in the public realm, is perfectly poised to address the preventive aspect of disaster management. In order to do so, urban planners require access to data and strong community involvement. City Progress addresses both components through a crowdsourced map with the input of global and national organizations, urban local bodies and planning networks, and citizen and community groups. The website that hosts the map also includes a vulnerability index that is a starting point for understanding disaster risk, whose components are determined by a partner global organization. Planners also interact with the website by uploading best practices, creating open source layers, and mapping and calculating their vulnerability. Citizens can provide feedback that has the potential to influence decisions made by governing bodies. We aim to pilot City Progress in India by identifying a city that is disaster prone. After communicating to the local governing body about the benefits of City Progress to their planning process, we aim to collaborate with community groups in the area, many of whom actively collect and map data related to their cities. We aim to secure seed funding from global and national organizations that work in the field of disaster prevention. Through this process, we hope to one day create a platform with a wealth of information about disasters and cities' efforts towards prevention. In addition, we also hope to garner community involvement and increase awareness about the importance of planning for disasters. Finally, we would like to congratulate the other finalists for putting up wonderful presentations. We enjoyed learning about your inspiring projects and wish you all the best in your future endeavors and hope to see your projects in action. Thank you very much.
Can everyone hear me? Yep, okay. All right, so my name is Brooks Reed, and I'm here to introduce and explain to you the microfarms proposal, and the microfarm network proposal. And so I'd just like to introduce my team very quickly. To my left, we have Letitia Pancrasi. To her left, Benjamin Horn, and on the end, Jizian Galea. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do have a 5th team member, Tony Ruiz, who unfortunately was not able to make it. And I think I speak for all of us when we say he is deeply missed. So before I begin, I'd also like to extend thanks primarily to the sponsors, thank you, to the Academic Selection Committee, the jury members, and the rest of the organizers that have facilitated the process to this point. And I think I'd also like to echo Shitu's comments about the other finalists. I think we're all very impressed with the quality of your proposals, and we've very much enjoyed learning about them. So moving on, the problem that we decided to tackle with our innovation was food and water insecurity in urban informal settlements. Now, as 1 in 8 people in the world live in these informal settlements, we thought that we needed a better way to protect them from shocks to their food and water access. And one of the ways that we thought that this would be beneficial is looking at urban agriculture and how to increase its impact. And so we've really taken the approach of creating a circular economy at the community level. And the circular economy is a concept that's been popularized by organizations such as the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the European Commission. But the basis of it is that it wants to reform the traditional way in which we are using and disposing of goods on the principles of recycle, reuse, and remanufacture. And we see this operating at a local level, at the household level, by creating a nexus between production of food, water, and compost. And so our technical innovation, which is one part of our proposal, is a container system consisting of 3 containers, one that grows food, one that filters water, and one that creates compost. And so we envision this creating a circular economy at the household level, as each output can be used as inputs in each other container. And to support this nexus of processes at the household level, we see each system in the context of a social network. And there's different layers of this. One is the local network, which is taking advantage of pre-existing community relations within informal settlements. But also, as community leaders of these networks can connect with each other to form a higher level network that takes the name of the microfarm network itself, which can focus its energy on developing capacity within the system by sourcing inputs to the containers that we need, and by pursuing profit maximizing functions that would increase economic resilience in the network. And so our results and basically the outcomes of participation in this, we hope, are increased access to food, increased access to clean water, and a reduction in waste and increase in reuse, which line up very nicely with 3 of the SDGs. And so these 2 components, the container system and the accompanying social network, should work together to further advance the SDG agenda in terms of food, water, and waste, effectively serving as a source of positive, sustainable change for the world's urban poor. Thank you, and we look forward to the next group.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for being here. I am Abraham Hidalgo. On my left, Ariana Espinosa Oliver, Cristian Gil Sánchez, Pilar Velosa Cantillo, and David Núñez Amortegui, and we are the Minga group. What is Minga? Minga is an indigenous word that refers to collective work towards a common objective. And that's what we're trying to do. We are all from Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia, and it's a city that right now is facing plenty of challenges. We decided to focus on one challenge, which is how to make more efficient and how to humanize the waste management system in our city. Minga, in this sense, it's an alternative that we have thought in order to improve the waste management system in the city through environmental friendly behaviors by citizens, and by dignifying as well the role of waste pickers as the center, as the core of this intervention, of this series of interventions that we are just going to explain. Now, in order to implement this project, we considered 3 main factors that are happening, that are proper of Bogota. Bogota is a city that is growing rapidly. During the last 10 years, the population has grown more than 13%, which is almost a million, like an increase of 1 million people in the city. Also, with regards to the waste management system, only 5% of the waste that is produced in our city is being adequately recycled, not only by waste pickers, but sometimes by some other actors that are involved in the process. And finally, these waste speakers, like these associations of waste speakers, are not formally recognized either by the institutions, by the public institutions, but also by the community who regard them as people with, associated with criminality, insecurity, and drug consumption. What we have also, like on the other side, what we have identified is that waste speakers are a crucial link in the chain of waste management in our city. In order to combine the necessity of enhancing the role of waste speakers and also modifying the behaviors of citizens, citizens from Bogota, what we have created is this Minga project, which has like two main components. The first component is about an intervention in the public space. In Bogota, we have practically very kind of small streets and small blocks that compose like all the neighborhoods in the city. That at the moment, all the houses, when they're going to dispose their waste, they just take it outside their door and they just leave it there without any treatment, without any adequate separation or collection. The first intervention that we're willing to do is painting some dots, green and yellow dots on the streets where the recyclable and non-recyclable items are going to be placed by all the houses who belong to that street. So for waste pickers, it's going to be easier to collect the recyclable material, and for the formal waste management service providers, it's going to be easier as well, just to pick the non-recyclable material. On the other side, we have developed an application that is willing to approach in a closer way both waste pickers and people who are living like households and families. Through this application, it will be like households will be able to know where are these dots placed in the streets, when are waste pickers going to be able to pass by these streets and collect the recyclable material. They're going to be able also to check some statistics on how are they performing with waste management, how are they separating. In case they have questions on how to separate waste, the waste pickers are going to be able to be in touch with them and provide some information on how to do this separation. So basically what we're trying to do is to approach these two communities that have been traditionally separated. At the end, what we are willing to do with Minga is to improve the skills of citizens to separate the waste that is produced within these households, and also to make easier and to provide more benefits to a large population of waste pickers in our city. And of course, to try to change this world street by street.
So everyone is waiting to know who the winner is going to be. So let me give the floor to Ambassador Stalin.
Assistant Secretary General Katsira, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, exactly a week ago, we were witnessing the end of proceedings that resulted in the declaration as the winner of a, in my view, highly unqualified person and team. I can guarantee you tonight this is different. The difference is that we had many more than one qualified team. We had several teams. The difference is that our teams demonstrated analytical skill and that they have shown the capacity for analytical depth. And the difference is that they have demonstrated that the propositions they put forward are realistic, feasible, and implementable. It is encouraging to know that it is possible to find such people with those qualifications. Many thanks, therefore, to all those who have participated in this contest, whether winner or not. I hope some of you will go into politics. We are in the third year of this contest. The number of participants has increased incredibly since we started in 2014. With this year, 444 students participating, divided into 114 teams. I never expected this contest to become so soon such a success. This would not have been possible without the great support of Professor Philippe Burin, without the great support of the members of the Academic Steering Committee, Professor Martina Iarango, Professor Ravi Pavani, and Professor Felipe Calvao. And the other members of the jury, Mrs. Maria Luisa Silva, Professor Aaron Ben-Joseph, Professor Svetozar Rajak, and Mr. Rena Teipelke. And this year, more than ever, with the help of Laurence Algara, who is I don't know where, executive assistant of the director. Many, many thanks to all of you. On our side, we are examining possibilities to further help those teams that are interested in implementing their projects. Aside from what we already tried to do, we hope to find institutions, organizations that are interested and ready and disposed to give advice and counsel in such matters. So if you have any suggestions or if you volunteer, let me know. Personally, I have to add, personally, I don't like to be part of a jury. I do not enjoy the role of eliminating people from the list of the best, especially not good people who have invested so much time, energy, and intelligence in their submissions. But that is life. I hope that those who are not among the happy few, whom we will celebrate tonight, have in one way or another benefited from their participation, and that they have learned something that will be of use to them later in life. In order to mitigate the disappointment of those who have come very close to the awards winner, we have invited this year 2 additional teams to come to Geneva, offering them the possibility to meet representatives of international organizations and NGOs in Geneva of interest to them. Of interest to you, I know, is to hear who is going to be the winning team. Let me therefore stop and with the help of the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Dr. Katsira, whom I would like to thank for a most interesting, enlightening presentation, sharing her experience, not only as a UN Habitat Executive Director, but also as a former mayor of Kigali. I would now like to do exactly that. And I will start, but I need some documents. Oh, here they are. Yeah. I will start with a team that can be proud to have been considered by the jury to be the third best among 114 teams. And that is the Micro Farm Network, applying a nexus approach to food security in Kigali. I will now announce the number 2 winning team. You will have to wait a little bit longer until the announcement of the team considered to be the best, unless you belong to the group of far-sighted and foresighted people and chess players who are able to anticipate my move after the next. So, the number 2 team is City Progress web portal for active data sharing, dissemination, and analysis. And now, the big surprise, the number 1 team, Minga Collective Waste Management. And now thank you very much. And now I'm happy to give the floor to Professor Martina Viarengo, Chairperson of the Academic Steering Committee, for closing remarks and the announcement of the topic.